सत श्री अकाल। नॉर्थ अमेरिका न्यूज़ 'ਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। मैं हाँ कमलजीत कौर। बुलेटिन की शुरुआत करते हैं हैडलाइंस के नाल। अमरीका मध्य पूर्व विच 900 अमरीकी सैनिकों को करेगा तैनात। पेंटागन के बुलारे ब्रिगेडियर जनरल पैट राइडर ने दी जानकारी। अमरीका के मेन सूबे के लेविस्टन शहर च वापरी घटना ते व्हाइट हाउस ने प्रगटाया दुख। आम लोगों को जांचकर्तावां दा सहयोग करने की कीती अपील। हीटिंग ऑयल दीयां कीमतां उत्ते रोक ते कार्बन प्राइस छूट नूं दुगना करेगी फैडरल सरकार। प्रधानमंत्री जस्टिन ट्रूडो ने किया ऐलान। हुण खबरां विस्तार दे नाल। अमरीका मध्य पूर्व विच 900 अमरीकी सैनिकों को तैनात करन जा रहा है। पेंटागन के बुलारे ब्रिगेडियर जनरल पैट राइडर ने यह जानकारी दी है। इजराइल और हमास के विचाले चल रही जंग के मद्देनज़र अमरीकी सैनिकों की तैनाती को बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मन्निया जा रहा है। पेंटागन के बुलारे ब्रिगेडियर जनरल पैट राइडर ने प्रेस ब्रीफिंग को संबोधन करते हुए राइडर ने कहा है कि मैं पुष्टि करदा कि 900 फौजी तैनात किए जा रहे हैं, जिसकी निगरानी अमरीकी सेंट्रल कमांड के हत्थों में है।
Secretary Austin spoke with Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant yesterday as part of their near-daily phone calls and received updates on Israel's operations to restore security. During the discussion, Secretary Austin reiterated the importance of ensuring humanitarian aid can be delivered into Gaza and repeated our calls for Israel to ensure the protection of civilians. A readout of the call has been posted to the DoD website. In addition to the security assistance for Israel we've announced previously, I can confirm that in addition to the Iron Dome interceptors we're flowing to Israel, we're also planning to provide the 2 U.S. Iron Dome systems currently in our inventory to Israel to help further bolster their air defense capabilities and protect citizens from rocket attacks. For operation security reasons, I'm not going to discuss shipment timelines or delivery dates, and will defer to Israel to make any announcements regarding future deployment and use of these systems. As part of our efforts to deter a broader conflict and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities, I can confirm that since our initial force posture announcement, approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States. Deployed and deploying units include a terminal high-altitude area defense battery from Fort Bliss, Texas, Patriot batteries from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Patriot and Avenger batteries from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and associated air defense headquarters elements from Fort Bliss and Fort Cavados, Texas. While I won't talk specific deployment locations for these forces, I can confirm that they are not going to Israel, and that again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities. Shifting gears, the White House announced today a $150 million security assistance package for Ukraine to support Ukraine's urgent security needs. This marks the 49th provision of equipment from DoD inventories to Ukraine since August 2021. This crucial security assistance includes air defense capabilities, artillery, ammunition, anti-tank weapons, and other important aid to help Ukraine counter Russia's ongoing aggression and continue its fight for independence and freedom. As you've heard Secretary Austin and other senior leaders say, the United States will continue to stand firmly with Ukraine, and we will continue to have their backs. Finally, the department released its annual report on suicide in the military for calendar year 2022 today. This report serves as the official release authority for annual suicide data on service members and their families.
हमास इजराइल जंग नूं लैके अमरीकी राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडन के बयान नूं लैके चल रही खबरों के दरमियान व्हाइट हाउस ने अपना स्पष्टीकरण जारी किया है। दरअसल व्हाइट हाउस ने कहा है कि भारत मध्य पूरब यूरोप आर्थिक कॉरिडोर के हमास हमले ते अमरीकी राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडन दी टिप्पणियां नूं गलत समझा जा रहा है। व्हाइट हाउस की राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा परिषद के बुलारे जोन किरबी ने पत्रकारों के सवालों के जवाब देंदे हुए इसके स्पष्टीकरण दिता है। जिक्रयोग है कि आस्ट्रेलिया के प्रधानमंत्री एंथनी अल्बानीज़ दे नाल एक प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस के दौरान राष्ट्रपति बाइडन ने कहा सी कि भारत मध्य पूरब आर्थिक कॉरिडोर इजराइल और हमास के विचाले जंग का कारण हो सकता है। उन्होंने कहा है कि यह सिर्फ मेरा अंदाजा है, इसनूं साबित करने लई सबूत कोई नहीं है।
Why do the president believes that the recently announced India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor threatens some players in the Middle East?
Say again.
President has said over the last week twice that this is an instinct that the IMEC corridor announced with the G20 summit may have precipitated Hamas terrorist attack against Israel. So my question is...
I think you misunderstood him. What he said was that he believed that the normalization process and the agreement that we were trying to reach between Israel and Saudi Arabia for normalization, which we believe is an important stepping stone to getting to a two-state solution, was what may have motivated Hamas to conduct those attacks. I think you misunderstood what he actually said.
I have one more question.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
That's up to Karine. Karine says yes.
Has Canada shared with you any evidence of these allegations against India?
I won't talk about intelligence matters one way.
ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ ਜਨਤਕ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੋਲੀਬਾਰੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਦਿਨੋਂ-ਦਿਨ ਵਧ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਅਮਰੀਕੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬੰਦੂਕ ਹਿੰਸਾ ਤੇ ਕਾਬੂ ਪਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸਫਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਦਰਅਸਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਮੇਨ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਿਸਟਨ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ 'ਚ ਬੀਤੇ ਦਿਨੀ ਵਾਪਰੀ ਸਮੂਹਿਕ ਗੋਲੀਬਾਰੀ ਦੀ ਘਟਨਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 18 ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੌਤ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਸੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਜਨਤਕ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਮੱਦੇਨਜ਼ਰ ਅਮਰੀਕੀ ਸੂਬੇ ਜਾਰਜੀਆ ਦੇ ਲੈਫਟੀਨੈਂਟ ਗਵਰਨਰ ਨੇ ਅਧਿਆਪਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੰਦੂਕਾਂ ਰੱਖਣ ਦੀ ਵਕਾਲਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਧਿਆਪਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਦੂਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਚਲਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜੀਂਦੀ ਸਿਖਲਾਈ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਹੀ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਕੋਈ ਹਮਲਾਵਰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੰਨ੍ਹੇਵਾਹ ਗੋਲੀ ਚਲਾਏ ਤੇ ਅਧਿਆਪਕ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੋੜਵਾਂ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇ ਸਕਣ।
It's sad, but it is the sign of the times that we're having to, go to these lengths to protect our children.
Part of this legislation creates a certified firearms training program that builds on existing law. These are not mandates. This is a local decision by a local school board.
There are only 3 districts that have considered it and have dealt with those policies. Arming teachers does not make students safer. In fact, it makes students less safe.
Anyone that's been in a combat situation or shooting situation will tell you it's not as easy as people think it is. Shooting at paper is paper. When you're talking about real world, it's a big difference.
ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਮੇਨ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਿਸਟਨ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ 'ਚ ਬੀਤੇ ਦਿਨੀ ਵਾਪਰੀ ਸਮੂਹਿਕ ਗੋਲੀਬਾਰੀ ਦੀ ਘਟਨਾ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅੱਜ ਵਾਈਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਕਿਰਿਆ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਈ ਹੈ। ਵਾਈਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਸਕੱਤਰ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਘਟਨਾ ਤੇ ਦੁੱਖ ਜਤਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਆਮ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਪੀਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਾਂਚਕਰਤਾਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਕਰਨ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸ਼ੱਕੀ ਹਮਲਾਵਰ ਅਜੇ ਵੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਘੁੰਮ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਲਈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਪ੍ਰਸ਼ਾਸਨ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜਾਰੀ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਹਦਾਇਤਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਾਲਣਾ ਕਰਨ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਿਛਲੇ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੈਂਕੜੇ ਗੋਲੀਬਾਰੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਵਾਪਰੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਅਫਸੋਸਜਨਕ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਦਿਵਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਬਾਈਡਨ ਪ੍ਰਸ਼ਾਸਨ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਵੱਧ ਰਹੀ ਗਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਵਚਨਬੱਧ ਹੈ।
I wanted to start with a word about the horrific news out of Lewiston, Maine last night, where we saw another tragic shooting that has taken at least 18 lives, injured many others, and left countless people in grief, shock, and trauma. As the President said in a statement earlier today, he and the First Lady are praying for the victims and their families, for those still fighting for their lives, and for the families, survivors, and community members reeling from this latest act of gun violence. And importantly, we continue to urge all residents to heed the warnings and guidance of the local officials, and federal law enforcement are on the ground to assist with the response. During the state dinner last night, the President was informed and stepped out to receive an initial briefing of the shooting. Later, he stepped out to speak with Maine Governor Janet Mills, as well as Senators Collins and King, and Congressman Jared Golden. He pledged full federal support in the wake of this horrific tragedy. This morning, the President received another briefing on the shooting from senior advisors, and he ordered that the U.S. flag be flown half-staff at the White House and upon all public buildings and grounds out of respect for all the victims as well. So I want to echo the President's sentiments on this tragedy and the epidemic of gun violence in general. This is not normal. We cannot accept this. There have been literally hundreds of mass shootings in the last year alone, leaving empty seats at dinner tables across the country, and leaving those who survive these heinous acts both physically and mentally scarred. And while we have made progress since the President signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law, much more must be done. And the President has been clear that executive action alone is just not enough. As the Vice President who oversees the newly established Office of Gun Violence and Prevention, stated during today's state luncheon, I know many of you watched very closely as well, and she said, it doesn't have to be this way. As our friends in Australia have demonstrated, again, it does not have to be this way. It's within Congress's power to pass legislation that will make our streets safer, that will make our communities safer, that will make our schools safer.
ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਪੋਲਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਸ ਛੋਟ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਗਣਾ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਫਿਊਲ ਚਾਰਜ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵੀ ਹੈ, ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀਟਿੰਗ ਆਇਲ ਦੀ ਡਿਲੀਵਰੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਕਾਰਬਨ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਾਧੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ 3 ਸਾਲ ਲਈ ਰੋਕ ਲਾਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਐਲਾਨ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕਲਾਈਮੇਟ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਇਨਸੈਂਟਿਵ ਪੇਮੈਂਟ ਰੂਰਲ ਟੌਪ ਅਪ ਰੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ 10 ਤੋਂ 20% ਦਾ ਵਾਧਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਅਪ੍ਰੈਲ 2024 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਆਖਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕਦਮ ਪੇਂਡੂ ਖੇਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ એનર્ਜੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉੱਚੀਆਂ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਦੇਣੀਆਂ ਪੈ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ।
Let me first talk a bit about the price on pollution. Economists and experts around the world have long known that putting a price on carbon emissions is the best way to drive down those emissions that cause climate change. It's the cheapest, most efficient, and most impactful way. And it's working. We are bending the curve, leading the G7 countries because of our price on pollution. And now we designed that price on pollution so that it incentivizes people to choose less polluting ways to live and work, and it puts money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 households where the federal system applies. So it both drives behavior and puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 households across the country. So it supports people to make better choices and puts money back in their pockets. However, we've heard clearly from Atlantic Canadians through our amazing Atlantic MPs that since the federal pollution price came into force this summer, replacing provincial systems, certain features of that pollution price needed to be adjusted to work for everyone. Specifically, as Cody said, many people in Atlantic Canada and in rural communities across the country rely on home heating oil. And to be blunt, the price signal on heating oil is not resulting in enough people being able to switch to electric heat pumps, despite people wanting to move to these cleaner home heating options. Well, as a government that is focused on evidence and data and outcomes and that is listening to Canadians, we heard you. We heard our Atlantic MPs and we heard Atlantic Canadians. We heard it through conversations at the door, conversations with other orders of government, concerns even as people were concerned about the need to continue to fight climate change, concerns about our abilities to continue to support our families and make it through winters, and concerns that even though people wanted to do the right thing, they weren't necessarily given the option or the ability to do it. So this team behind me worked incredibly hard with our ministers, with our whole team, to get it right, to make sure that we are still leading in the fight against climate change, that we are unwavering in our commitment to protect Atlantic Canadians and indeed all Canadians from the extreme weather events that are increasingly the norm.
ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਹਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਦੇਸ਼ੀ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਪੈਟੀ ਹਾਸ਼ਦੂ ਨੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਕੋਰਟ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਔਨ ਰਿਜ਼ਰਵ ਚਾਈਲਡ ਵੈਲਫੇਅਰ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਲੰਮੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਫੰਡਿੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਸਟ ਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਸਮਝੌਤੇ ਦੀ ਹਾਲ ਹੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਨਜ਼ੂਰੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਚਰਚਾ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ $23 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਦੀ ਸੈਟਲਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 3 ਲੱਖ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਮੁਆਵਜ਼ਾ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੈ।
Week after week as a parliamentarian. And of course, I do want to thank the AFN, you, Joanna, and National Chief, and obviously the plaintiffs, Mashum and Trout, and certainly Dr. Blackstock and the First Nations Child and Caring Society, who have persisted. I'm reminded of the saying during the Hillary Clinton campaign, nevertheless she persisted, and it really was about persistence on behalf of the litigants, because there were many times, I'm sure, that people felt like giving up, reaching walls of unwilling partners, a partner in particular, which would have been Canada. I also want to thank the Honourable Marie Sinclair, who came in last Christmas when we did reach the agreement in principle, and who helped, I think, all of us find a path forward to have these conversations with mutual respect and with honesty and with integrity. I would also be remiss not to thank Minister Miller, who was a big part of the work that we did on our side, and certainly is a champion, and wishes he could be here today. He said to send his regards. And I also would like to thank Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for the mandate to be able to do this work. It's hard to do the work as a minister if you don't have the fiscal mandate to be able to do it. And the Prime Minister's office worked very closely with my office and Minister Miller's and all of you so that we could get to this historic day. And it is a historic day for First Nations children and families, and for all of Canada. I'm really grateful to Ashley and Carolyn and others that shared their stories at the ceremony that we had that was put on by AFN on Monday. The stories are painful to hear. Too many Canadians don't know those stories. Many Canadians don't understand what kinds of historic harms have been caused. But it's hard to hear stories like Ashley's of children that have survived foster home after foster home, to be disconnected from their roots, their culture, their language, their family. Or stories like Carolyn Buffalo and her son, who have suffered tremendous indignities as they tried to keep their son close to home, close to love, close to family. And the many, many other stories that I've heard in my career previous to politics, and certainly as a minister over the last 8 years, of people dislocated and in immense pain as a result of that dislocation and that discrimination.
ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਪੱਛਮੀ ਹਿੱਸੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਥਿਤ ਹਾਈ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਨੇੜੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਕੂ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਦੀ ਜਾਂਚ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਪੁਲਿਸ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਛੁਰੇਬਾਜ਼ੀ ਦੁਪਹਿਰੇ 1 ਵਜੇ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਰੀਗਲ ਹਾਈਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਔਕਵਰਡ ਕਾਲਜੀਏਟ ਇੰਸਟੀਚਿਊਟ ਦੇ ਨੇੜੇ ਹੋਈ। ਇੱਕ ਅਪਡੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਬੁਲਾਰੇ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਘਟਨਾ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਨੇੜੇ ਵਾਪਰੀ ਹੈ। ਡਿਊਟੀ ਇੰਸਪੈਕਟਰ ਪੀਟਰ ਵੈਬੀ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ 17 ਸਾਲਾ ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਨੇੜੇ ਚਾਕੂ ਲੱਗਣ ਕਾਰਨ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਲਿਆ। ਇੰਸਪੈਕਟਰ ਵੈਬੀ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ ਪੁਸ਼ਟੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਵਾਰਦਾਤ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਵਾਪਰੀ ਤੇ ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ ਮਦਦ ਲੈਣ ਲਈ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਰਤ ਆਏ। ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਹਾਲਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਸਪਤਾਲ ਲਿਜਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹੁਣ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਸਥਿਰ ਦੱਸੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
Officers received a radio call to attend this address with respect to a young male who had been stabbed. They arrived on scene to find a male in the stairwell, and in fact he was stabbed. What we believe at this time, and it is actually the stairwell behind me, we believe at this time that the incident occurred outside, away from school property, and that the male came to the school in order to get assistance. We do not believe that anybody's at risk at the school, and that there's no, we do not believe there's going to be any issues moving forward with the school. What I can tell you though is that the male is in hospital and was transported to Sunnybrook via emergency room.
What is his status right now?
He is in serious condition, but not life-threatening. He's 17 years old.
Can you tell us, was this gentleman a student at the school, or did he just go to school for help?
He was a student at the school, yes.
Okay, and do you have anyone in custody, or do you have any idea of the suspects?
We do not have suspect information, and what I would ask is that if anybody in the public has seen anything, has witnessed anything, please call 416-808-1300 or 416-222-TIPS, which is Crime Stoppers.
Do you guys have any indication of how far he had to travel to get here?
I'm sorry?
Is there any indication of how far he had to travel to get here?
We do not believe it's a long way off. We are reviewing video at this time, so we hope to have more answers later on, but it is still very early in the investigation. investigation.
So the students were on their lunch break and he was stabbed off school property, but not far from school.
As I said, it's still very early in the investigation. I can't confirm that, but at this point, we don't believe it happened on school property. We're fairly confident it did not, but I don't have the details as to what happened off property at this point.
Are there any witnesses at this point?
We are asking for witnesses at this point.
So in fact, there could be a primary crime scene somewhere else, possibly. It could be.
Yes, absolutely.
Who made the phone call?
I don't know who made the phone call at this point.
Okay, so how many times was he stabbed?
One stab wound.
Or so?
In his midsection.
And do we know why?
I don't have that information.
Do we know why he came to school?
Yeah, well, he came to school to get help. He was a student at the school. We believe he was stabbed away from the school, and he came into the school to get help.
So he's on his lunch break.
I don't know if he was on his lunch break. I can tell you he was not in the school at the time. I don't know why he wasn't in the school.
Can you tell us who discovered him in the stairwell?
I don't have that information.
What about suspects? Any information?
We have no suspect information at this time.
Inspector, schools go through lockdown training all the time, and then you hope you never have to put into practice. But considering how those practices go, and then they had to do it today, how would you say the lockdown went in terms of the way it was supposed to work?
Well, I wasn't here for the lockdown, but what I can tell you is it went very well, from what I understand.
Any sense on why he was stabbed?
No indication at this time.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਡਿਪਟੀ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਅਤੇ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਟੀਆ ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਪੈਨਸ਼ਨ ਪਲਾਨ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਸਤਾਵ ਤੇ ਚਰਚਾ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੂਬਾਈ ਤੇ ਖੇਤਰੀ ਹਮਰੁਤਬਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਪੀਟਰ ਬੈਥਨ ਫੈਲਵੀ ਨੇ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਯੋਜਨਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਜਿੱਠਣ ਲਈ ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨੂੰ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਸੱਦਣ ਦੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਪੱਤਰ ਲਿਖਿਆ, ਜਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਆਖੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਨੋਵਾ ਸਕੋਚੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੂਬਾ ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਕੌਂਸਲ ਆਫ ਫੈਡਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਮੁਖੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੁਸ਼ਟੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਬੈਠਕ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇਗੀ। ਅਸੀਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਪੈਨਸ਼ਨ ਪਲਾਨ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਸੂਬਾਈ ਖੇਤਰੀ ਅਤੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਬੁਲਾਵਾਂਗੇ।
And Alberta is on track to reach fees of just $10 a day in 2026. This is making such an important difference for families across Canada, across Alberta, and here in Calgary. So thank you, Rebecca, for your partnership. Now, the great people here at Ever are doing some incredibly important, incredibly innovative work. And in the years to come, that work will be more important than ever for Alberta, for Canada, and for the whole world. That's because, as we have just heard, today, the world's major economies are moving at an unprecedented pace to fight climate change and to retool their economies to build the net zero industries of today and tomorrow. Canada has to keep up. And we have to not just keep up, we have to be in the lead. And we can be. That is why our Clean Economy Jobs Plan is making historic investments to build Canada's clean economy and to create a new generation of opportunities for Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. One of those investments, and something that I believe is going to be a game changer for Canada's clean economy, is the new $15 billion Canada Growth Fund, whose very first inaugural investment is being made right here today in this amazing company. The Canada Growth Fund is led by some of Canada's top investors, and it is going to invest in Canadian businesses, help them scale, and support Canadians in attracting our share of the trillions of dollars in private capital that are waiting to be invested in the global clean economy. This fund is going to help great Canadian companies like Ever grow and keep their headquarters here in Canada, here in Calgary, and expand around the world from their Canadian base, as Ever is already doing. And this investment is going to turbocharge that growth. So I am incredibly proud to announce that the Canada Growth Fund's very first inaugural investment is being made in Ever, right here in Calgary, here in Alberta. This $90 million investment is going to help Ever accelerate the world's leading geothermal energy technology, which has the potential to significantly reduce emissions.
ਬੁਲੇਟਿਨ ਦੇ ਅਖੀਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨਸ ਤੇ। ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਮੱਧ ਪੂਰਬ ਵਿੱਚ 900 ਅਮਰੀਕੀ ਸੈਨਿਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਰੇਗਾ ਤਾਇਨਾਤ। ਪੈਂਟਾਗਨ ਦੇ ਬੁਲਾਰੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਗੇਡੀਅਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਪੈਟ ਰਾਈਡਰ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ। ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਮੇਨ ਸੂਬੇ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਿਸਟਨ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ 'ਚ ਵਾਪਰੀ ਘਟਨਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਈਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਨੇ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਇਆ ਦੁੱਖ। ਆਮ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਂਚਕਰਤਾਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਅਪੀਲ। ਹੀਟਿੰਗ ਆਇਲ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੋਕ ਤੇ ਕਾਰਬਨ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਸ ਛੋਟ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਗਣਾ ਕਰੇਗੀ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ। ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਐਲਾਨ। ਸੋ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।